All right, I just want to do a call out for Rob from Bitwell. He's the guy that I saw most of the information from. Probably 90% of the information I figured out was from him about how to do the actual fork rebuild. There's other YouTubers that taught me, showed me some things about how to put the blue tape over there to protect it, how to, jack up your bike using a regular jack, and some other little pieces that I didn't have, and like some of the torque settings, how to find some of those. But I do want to call out Rob from Bitwell because 90% of this was similar to like the 01 rebuild, fork rebuild he did. But now hopefully this helps him out and he can see where the 2012 is. Y'all have a great. All right, everybody. All right, my name is Kevin here, and I've decided to take on a DIY challenge here to repair the fork seal on my front right fork of my 2012 Fat Bob. I was just going to the dealership a couple weeks ago to get a little estimate on how much it would cost if I trade this in, what they would give me for it. And literally, as I was driving to the dealership, the fork seal came loose. I got oil all over my leg. So needless to say, they didn't offer me a very good deal for it, right? So what I'm going to do here is I saw a YouTube from 2001, 2002 on a Fat Bob Dyna. This hasn't been done in a long time, so I figured, based on that and all the other research that I did, see if I can do it and maybe make a video of it. So I'll show here first, like all the parts and everything that I have to start this project, because it's going to be quite robust. As you see, we are going to have to jack up that bike because we're going to have to take the front tire off and the brakes and the front fender and the forks. So I went ahead and I put together my little parts list, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of go over those now. All right, everybody. So here's the parts list to do everything that we need to do here. If anything gets added to the parts in the end, I'll go ahead and update this video and try to maybe include it as we go into that spot. But this is everything that I've figured out that we need. So first off, you need a torque wrench, right? It's kind of important. You need all the know the torque measurements for your bike. You really don't want to over tighten or under tighten. This is a vehicle that's not something you really want to mess around with. This is a bushing kit. I went ahead and got the official Harley one for 2012 Fat Bob, which you can see the part number there is 49379-09. They do, it was interesting, they do only come in a single set for each fork side, and it was like 40 bucks or 43 bucks, you can see on there, which I thought was kind of, bush league, but whatever. You can get some aftermarket ones, but I kind of want to do this weekend, and I only had the right fork seal that was leaking, so I said, you know what, I'll just get the OEM one. It's probably better to do it that way, but it's up to you. What I really liked about this one too, you'll see later on the video, it's really important to kind of replace that brass fitting. Now, all the videos I saw, it was kind of important to do that. Some of the sets that you order online do not come with that brass fitting, so you can always probably go to Home Depot and get that that little fitting there, and it would probably cost you a cent or two. This is my seat. Obviously, I mean, one thing that's really cool about this is that take this, spins. Now I have a seat, and you can do it to different levels and everything. It's kind of handy thing to be moving around the garage in and kind of doing different things. Here, move this up a little bit. Oh, you can see now I have a nice tall seat that I can move around. I just have a little clip here for clipping it to things if I want, because it claps right down. It's really kind of handy. So you need some fork oil, right? And then you'll need different crescent wrenches here. We got the 3/4 inch. We got a 9/16 inch. We have a 1/2 inch. Now you also need a 6mm drive socket, a 1/4 inch drive socket, a 5/16 inch drive socket. I didn't have those when I started this project, so these purchases I did have to do. It was interesting when I went to go to the dealership and I asked them how much it would cost to do this. They were like, well, it's $40 for the part, but about 2 to 3 hours worth of labor. So I was like, okay, this would be a good DIY. and but I do have to pay for a little bit for little extra parts, but I'm gonna make it way ahead because they charge about $150 an hour, and I guess my time's a little cheaper. All right, this is another important one. This is for the caliper for the front brake. It's actually a 10mm socket, but it's a 12-point. You gotta make sure you get the 12-point, not the 6-point, which comes in most ratchet sets, because this is for vehicle. You'll need drive extension. For mine, the gasket, it's a 35mm for the cap for on top of the fork. You'll see here on top of the fork. We're gonna have to take that off, and there's a spring inside there from all the videos that I've seen. Now, you're gonna need a fork driver. This is to, push everything down into the fork so it's sealed down in there nicely. And this is, allows you to kind of put it over so you don't damage the fork or the seal. Now, I was able to luckily find the instructions from a 2016 Fat Bob, and everything I read said everything from 2012, 2016, the settings were all the same. The reason why this is important, I got the front fender, how to remove it, front brake caliper, because I'm going to have to remove that, front wheel, front fork. Now, I watched the videos and everything, and obviously that tells you a lot, but what's really good about having these is the actual torque settings, right? So you can even see here on the fastener here, front torque 15 to 21 foot-pounds, right? And that's why you have the torque wrench, right? That goes from like 10 to 150 pounds for torque. Then JBL speaker, that's optional. For me, it is not optional because I need a little music. Flathead screwdriver to take the cap off. You're gonna need a little pick there because there's this little metal clamp. Actually, this is what it looks like right here. You're gonna have to remove the old one out, and you'll use that to kind of pull it out. Okay, and obviously you're gonna need to jack it up because you're gonna be taking off the front wheel and everything. I'd recommend definitely want to start loosening the bolts on the front, at least take off the front fender, and maybe loosen a couple bolts so you're not like jacking around with this, but this is just a regular car jack. You can use a normal car jack as well. Just need to be careful with it. I'm just trying to combine this with that other video. All right, so let's get started. All right, YouTubers, as I promised, I'm adding a little addendum to the parts list here with some items that you actually need for this fork rebuild. I found out as I was going through, I did need a 15/16 inch socket. This was for the axle. You'll see later on in the videos that I realized this and I had to do a quick run to Home Depot to get this. But this was the size of the axle bolt. One of the videos that I'd seen, they never covered this, and I figured that out along the way. The other thing is the 6mm socket. I actually ended up not needing this. Apparently in 2002, it was a 6mm bolt, but it is no longer that anymore. It is a little bit bigger. It's actually a 12mm hex socket. So I had to go get this hex socket. And if I see the bolt here, see my bolt looked more like this. This is the old bolt. Looks more like this. And obviously I replaced the washer. I'm actually done with the build here, but you'll see that as we go through the video that this was the bolt that I had to remove and replace, and this fits it just perfectly. All right. The other thing, obviously, you're going to need a little oil pan here and the funnel to put the fork oil inside the fork. All right, guys, time to take off the fender off of here. You can see the 1/4 inch sockets right here, and you just need to loosen 2 bolts on this side. You're gonna have 2 here, right there, and there's gonna be 2 on the other side. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and do those off video, and then. All right, guys, got the front fender. It's coming off now. Take those 2 bolts off. Get this squeeze through here. There we go. So here's the front fender, off the front tire. I'm gonna lay this down up here with all the pieces together. Now, what I will say, want to make sure you know, you have to clamp onto the little bolt on the other side. I use just a little wrench here and to clamp it down, little grips, and use my drill to kind of pull it out. Okay, guys. Next, what I'm going to do here is we're going to take off the caliper here for the brakes here. See these two bolts? We're going to unscrew these, and I'm going to use that the 10 millimeter 12-point socket to do it, so you can see everything's on here. You can do that. I also have some zip ties here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tie it up to the center part of the fork up here so it doesn't hang loose. I don't want these wires, this like drain here for the oil and everything to going in there, or the brake oil. I really don't want that kind of putting any stress and maybe kind of separating from here. So you want to relieve that stress off of this line, and we're going to put up on the fork right here. I got a couple of these little zip ties at Home Depot for nothing. I have like probably multiple bags of these all over the place because I use these for like 50 million different uses, and for like cable ties, tying back cables behind TVs, to like mounting stuff up. These are really handy. It's funny, they're like 1,000,001 uses. All right, guys, here we are again. So now you can see calipers off. I have it kind of zip tied up there, that middle bar there on the fork, so it's kind of off and out of the way. Whoop, careful about that. And make sure it's kind of up there, just hanging. Make sure it's safe and out of the way, not putting any strain on that line. Cool. You could probably change the front brake pads at this point since you took it off. But you know, taking that caliper off and replacing those brake pads, you don't really need to take that fender off and everything. So, I mean, that can be done on another project. I mean, you could probably do it here, but it's up to you, okay? I will look at another video for that one, but I'm probably not gonna do it because I just did it not too long ago. Thanks. All right, everybody. So now before we take the front tire off, we need to jack up the motorcycle using a regular car jack. Now the kick stands down, of course, obviously, because that's going to help give you leverage as well. I'm lifting off the front wheel, so you want to make sure you put the jack on the frame, not on the casing underneath there, but on the actual frame. So you can see that's right there. So line that all up, and what you'll see, this works correctly. As I start lifting it up, the front wheel is now off the ground. That's it. See, it's now elevated. You don't really need a lot off there. This is on the frame. This is pretty stable. Kickstand is also holding it. You don't want to go obviously too far because you just tip the bike completely on over. There I have the ABS, the security system, so mine's saying, hey, it's tilted, but I don't have my key fob with me. I have it inside. I'll go get that. But that was it. Really simple and easy. And you can see my bike front wheel is off the ground. Okay. All right, YouTubers, here we go. All right, so we're into a slight little snag here in my original assessment of all the parts that I needed. I needed a socket for the axle here. Now, I had a 7/8 socket, but as we all learned in middle school math, 7/8 is equal to 14/16, and I needed a 15/16 inch socket. I found that out I tried to Google it, couldn't really find it. I called the Harley dealership, they're actually pretty cool, called the service department, and they told me that's what I needed was a 15/16. It's around Home Depot, another $3 or $4 later, and look at that. Fits like a glove. Yep. So I'm gonna go ahead and start taking off this axle now. All right, now I got the front wheel off. Now just pull the axle out, right? This is the direction it kind of goes in this end, right? And then you have the front wheel. And this is the bolt and the nut that goes in on the other side. And then this is the little clamp here that went underneath here, because that's what I'm gonna have to get up in there to get the fork oil out. Okay? Definitely would recommend putting your parts out here laid out cleanly, on plastic, so you know where it is, and you know the order you need to put it back in. Okay, so and one little snag, and I'll try to update all the parts list in the beginning. But what apparently different from like a 2002 Fat Bob and a 2012 is there's an extra bolt. There's like this one little bolt right here that comes out, and then there's another one further up, but this one has this other bolt. So what I did is I found the bolt. It was in my bushing kit, and I went to O'Reilly, and I found out I needed a 12 millimeter, and then so the only way I could get the 12 millimeter if I bought this 3-piece set. So basically I needed a hex 12 millimeter socket, and what I'll do is I'll update the instructions in the beginning showing this middle hex socket to remove that bolt. So all right, now I got it. Also, I went ahead and got an oil pan here to get it ready, because when you unbolt this, I believe there's still that second bolt, but when you unbolt all this, that fork oil is going to come out. You don't want it to make a mess, so I'm going to have it go out into there. Cool. All right, so that was definitely a lot harder than I thought. So ran into a slight little issue here where it was really kind of hard to get this last little remaining bolt off. I had to go to Home Depot to get the right size 12 millimeter socket, and again I'm going to update the information in the beginning of this meeting talking about the required tools. But every time I kept trying to release that, the fork tube kept spinning, right? So what I did, I just rigged something here. I don't know if this is a textbook here, but I just stuck a Phillips head screwdriver through that hole, and then I had it cantilever over here, I guess, into the side of this other fork. So every time I tried to pull and spin this and open it up, this wouldn't spin because of this system here. And then I used a 1/2-inch breaker bar. You know, typically a socket has like a 3/8 inch, right? That's a normal one. But the socket right here I've got is a 1/2 inch, so I had to use a 1/2 inch here. Now there's adapters you can get. Obviously you go from a 1/2 inch back down to 3/8 inch, and 3/8 inch back up to 1/2 inch. But typically you want to use the right size if you can, especially when you're working on a vehicle, because you get better leverage. If you use a 3/8 inch socket and you try to, do something like this without a breaker bar is basically one that doesn't, automatically rotate back for you every time you twist it, but it's meant so you can hit it and you can really bang it pretty hard. It feels really tight to open little bolts. Well, let's say I used a breaker bar and I got it up in here and I was able to loosen that screw, but I thought I would kind of show that. It's a little loose now. I'm just going to unscrew it all off right now. Okay. All right, so I just want you to see I've got the oil pan here. Start loosening this off. Oop. Which way am I going here? The right way. So coming out. Well, you can see the oil is starting to come out now, or the fluid here, I guess. Fork oil. Messy stuff. Right. Hands are getting a little dirty here. I'm just going to throw away this towel. It's almost completely out now. There we go. You can see it all kind of coming out. This is all the fork oil. I've actually never seen fork oil before, but this is the old bolt. I believe there might be a washer in there too. Probably want to feel for that. A washer. No, there isn't one. All right, I'm going to let that leak out the drain out. One of the things I do say is you can grab the fork and work it to kind of get the fluid out. But I don't think I had that much in there, because based on what was all over my jeans the other day, I'm thinking that there's not that much left in there. So it's pretty good. I'm gonna let this drain a little bit and then finish this sucker up. All right, now that's all drained out into the reservoir there. Now we need to remove the right fork from the assembly here, and you need to disassemble all this, because when you put the bushings back on, you need to actually put it on from the top, not from the bottom, because otherwise, if you put it in from the bottom, what will happen is the bushing will actually like crack or may ruin the seal. Then you're just gonna be leaking fork oil all over again anyway. So you actually have to remove this completely from here. So to do this, first thing, we need to remove this cap right here. And if you turn it around, you see a little notch here. See a little notch? So I'm gonna take my flathead screwdriver, and I'm gonna have to try to give it a couple little taps with a hammer and try to pop this thing off. Be careful, you don't want to overextend and shoot up and scratch everything, but you might need a couple of taps there to get that thing to kind of come off. All right, now I see I can pop this right on up. Little chrome cover. Next thing we need to do is pop this thing up a little bit, being careful not to mar the fork at all with a screwdriver. Just gonna pull that little seal off. All right, so I just pried it and stuck my screwdriver in here a little bit in between here to kind of pull this on up. So now I just kind of want to move both of these pieces away. I mean, it's gonna be hard to just make it stay there, but if you look down in there, see a little retaining clip? That's what is actually, holding, well, not fully holding down the fork seal, but you see the fork seal is just below it. We've got to pull that little retaining clip out, and that's what we need that little pick for. So I'm going to go get that pick, and I'm going to go pick out that little clip. All right, so now I got this little clip out. You can see this little clip. Kind of used a little screwdriver thing here. Use that to kind of pick it out. Now what you're going to want to do is remove this from here. But when you remove that little metal piece, you're trying not to scrape the fork. You really don't want any scrapes on your fork at all, okay? So when you do it, you have to fully separate it apart and pull it off the fork, okay? All right. Now that, get rid of that mosquito. Now that we separate all these pieces here and we remove that clamp out of there, we can throw that clamp away because we're going to replace that. Now I'm going to kind of video and kind of show you actually do this one piece, because the way all the videos show you guys go boom and force this thing down in a quick motion, because now that there's nothing kind of holding that stuff down, that fork seal should pop right on out, and the rest of the assembly, since nothing's holding it all together, should just pop right out. All right, so I'm going to give a couple good tugs. Let's see how this goes. Oh, and there you go. Just came apart. And also, you want to make sure you keep this cap. Sometimes this will stay inside of here. After you do all that jerking motion, it'll kind of come right on off. You really want to save this piece. It's kind of important that we don't put it back up, that we put it back on. But now you got the bottom of the fork off. Now we can start disassembling the rest of these pieces. Now you can see a bunch of other clamps here. They're part of your bushing kit that we're going to be replacing as well. It's not just a fork seal you want to replace, but some of these other little clamps here. There's like 1, 2, 3, like a little washer, 2 clamps right here. But to put all this stuff on, you can see it'll be hard to put this on here, this fork seal from the bottom. There's a lot of potential for scratching and scraping it, and thus ruining the effectiveness of that seal. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on that. All right, now, so we got the bottom assembly off. We have these bushings still left on there, and part of our bushing kit they replace this for us, right? So what you'll notice here is this one bottom piece spins in here and fits in a groove here perfectly. It doesn't slide up and down. The rest of these pieces slide up and down, but this bottom one fits in there perfectly. But you see that there's a little bit of a slit here. If you spin it around, you'll find that spot. And what you'll do is you'll stick a little screwdriver in there, spread that apart a little bit, and then I need 2 hands for this, and then we're gonna pull that down. Now be careful, when I pull that down, the rest of the stuff's gonna start coming off. Now this stuff might not come off as much, but these other 2 pieces will. And what we wanna do is put them down in the order that they kind of come off so that you know exactly how to put them back on, okay? All right, so once we take those clamps off, we wanna kind of move off the rest of these pieces, just pull them down. Like the fork seal, you know you're gonna get rid of that. That's pretty much trash. You definitely want to save the metal. You don't want that falling in the oil. The other piece kind of fell into the oil. But now that this is fully clean, you probably want to wipe it down a little bit, because now this is the fork. Now we're gonna have to pull that out, because you can see here, you see the little ridges right here? This is the thing what you're worried about. When you put the fork seal, if you try to come up from the bottom, you could potentially mess up that fork seal again. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that it goes on smooth. That's why you have to go in from the top, because it's smooth all the way from the top. But here it has all these little, edges here and everything. You don't want to go up there. All right, now we're gonna need to take off the fork tube. Now, I don't want to scratch all this stuff up. And obviously I know the size of this is a 35 millimeter, because I Googled this beforehand, because 2012 Fat Bob, I think obviously 2012 through 2016 is similar. I mean, you can get special like actual fork caps that are like lower profile. I mean, I'm using the standard one I got off of Amazon for like 10 or 12 bucks. Hopefully this will work. But one of the other things I kind of Googled and looked at, and it talked about you don't want to scratch this up. So it recommended putting some painter's tape on there first to help prevent it from scratching. So I'm going to put a little bit around there, see if that helps a little bit, and then I'll try to crank that thing off. All right, so here it is. I put some blue painter's tape on top of there. Now I already kind of cracked this a little bit, but it worked really well. Just put a little light all the way around so it wouldn't scratch. And then, put this on here. I used my torque wrench, right? So it's on there. And I kind of leverage myself against the bike. You don't want this thing falling over. And there you go. And a ratchet here, just kind of, now it's just loosening off. Now you want to be careful. There's a spring inside of here that's going to kind of pop off. It's a pretty big spring. And that spring is like a spring on like a garage door, but it's under a high amount of tension. So you want to be kind of careful about this. And I'm going to need 2 hands. I'm going to continue this through, but when I'm done unscrewing, I'll show you what it looks like. All right, I finished unscrewing, and actually don't have a spring. I guess this is it pushes up against a spring. There's a spring further down in there. Newer design, I guess, compared to the way the 2002 was. The 2002 had a spring going all the way up to the top. But I guess this has like a tube that then hits a spring that's a little bit further down. But I have the cap off now. And I guess I'm just going to take this off. I took the top off. I'll go ahead and put this. I'm pretty sure the orientation's not important, but I'm going to say I'm going to put on the plastic over here with the top. And I'm going to put the top in line with where the can came off. So I know that's exactly how it goes. I'm pretty stickler about, keeping the orientation the same. All right, now that the cap's off here, to get this tube off, we need to loosen these 2 pinch bolts here on the side to relieve the pressure off of the fork tube. So with that, on mine for 2012 Fat Bob, looks like this is why I need that 5/16" hex bit socket, right? And it fits in there just perfectly. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to completely pull the bolts out. I'm just going to loosen them. I mean, obviously being careful not to scratch the tubes or anything, but I want to loosen them enough so that, I can pull the tube out. Because remember, as I said earlier, all the stuff that we want to put on comes in from the top, not from the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen these up and start pulling the tube out. All right, now I've got my fork assembly. I took it apart. I loosened the bolts on the frame there to loosen the fork. I didn't take the bolts completely off, right? You can see still on there. Just loosen those clamps, and then the fork just started to slide down. So be careful not to loosen too quickly. You don't want the fork just falling all out, right? And also, you know, I said earlier, there's still some pieces in here, like the spring, and there's a washer actually down in there. The washer is sitting on top of the spring, and then that other piece of metal that I pulled out earlier sits on top of that. So it looks like that metal tube sits on top of the washer, which then pressures onto the spring. That's why, you know, it gives you shocks in the fork, right? Here, I've already started putting together, so sorry, jumped ahead a little bit, but this is the order in which you kind of put these things on here. This is the big, like, thin washer, right? Bevel side down, going towards the bottom piece here. Then you'll have like a thinner piece, and you'll know that when it's the right one because it just slides right on over pretty easily in here. And then you have the thicker piece that will fit right in this little groove, and it should spin. It should spin well. Use two hands here, but it should spit and fit in that groove there pretty quickly. I can't slide it up or down really because it's kind of snapped into place. Okay. So now that you've got that on there, then we can move on to the next little pieces. All right, now that we got some of these pieces on here, we want to kind of grease this up with some of the fork oil to make sure this is all lubricated real well. I took the cap from the fork oil container and put a little bit of fork oil, made it easier, and put a little towel down. So I'm just gonna dab a little bit with my fingers. Just, you don't need a lot, just a little bit. So it's nice and lubricated. Kind of want to do a little bit over here too. Remember, fork oil sits in here, so you're fine. Just kind of grease that up a little bit. Wipe your hands down a little bit. Okay. Now remember that cap that we had here from that came off on the bottom of the fork. And make sure to put that cap back on. It's like I need an assistant. Okay. Put that on there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get that fork lower, and we're going to put that underneath. Okay. Let me see if I can do that, and then I'm going to grab it. It's right here. Then we're going to slide it on. Again, hard to do this with two hands. And I'm going to show you how to kind of orient that. All right, so now I just put the assembly right on there. One thing to make sure is, like, remember on the, you know, the upper right here, we put that little cap on the end of it. Now, I've seen some videos where they put some grease on there or something. I didn't have any grease here, so I just had to be real careful. So I kind of put it on a little horizontally. I put the cap on the end of this so that way it would slide in there, and I held it horizontally. And then what you would do is you could see, boom, it's like flush in there just right, because you want to make sure it's, so I wouldn't really mess with this that much, turn it over or anything. And now what we'll do is, you know, I bought this off of Amazon, little fork driver, kind of put that little clamp down on there, so it size on there like so. Then, again, hard to do this with two hands. I'm going to wrap this around. Now I'm going to bang down lightly to make sure everything's seated properly. All right, this kind of goes on one side. This goes on the other. And you see the little notch there. They kind of go together. Kind of like so. So you can just go boom, boom, and knock it down. Okay, just to make sure everything's seated. All right. Now, remember those bolts we talked about with the washer, and I mentioned how important that washer was, making sure that stays on here. Some of the videos I've seen, and they kind of showed this bolt, which is why we needed, I think it was at the 6mm socket earlier. And I put in the beginning saying, hey, we need the 6mm socket. That was based on the 2012 specs. But in the kit, and what was on mine, was this. So I had to go figure it out. This is a 12mm socket set, which is probably a little bit harder to find.
You can get it AutoZone. I had to buy a whole kit to get this size that will fit this, but whatever. I mean, again, this kit came with both bolts. I can only imagine that this bushing kit is meant to support multiple versions of the dyno and the fork, so that, because my fork has this bolt, not that bolt. So I'm just going to screw this. Now that I've put the upper and lower assembly together, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and at least get this thing started, get some threads going, screwing into the bottom here, so that this thing kind of stays together. Otherwise, this thing's just going to start falling apart, so I can start putting the bushings and everything, the rest of the stuff in here, the fork seal. All right, now this is where the manual kind of comes in handy. So I looked in the manual here. So for the fork assembly, it says front fork seat pipe screw, that screw that was tightening at the bottom, says torque value should be 30 to 37 foot-pound seconds. Foot-pounds. There's no seconds, there's no time allotted here, so it's just foot-pounds. Now, and I just got this thing off Amazon. You know, you turn this bottom screw counterclockwise to loosen it. This is what I'm hitting with my pinky. And then you put it to 0 at whatever level you want, like 30, 40. And then you go increments of 1, 2, 3, 4. If you want to go to like 5 pounds, 6 pounds per foot-pounds. So I went to the 30 mark. And since 34 is in between, 30 and 37, I went to the 30 mark at 0, and then I went to the 4 mark after that, so should be at 34 pounds. So what happens is, so now when I start tightening this bolt, what's going to happen in the bottom here, when I start tightening that bolt, the torque wrench should just give once I get to that tightness of 34 pounds, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just use this and tighten it to that 34 pounds. Okay, so now I got this guy set for 34 foot-pounds torque with that screw. So it's in there nice and tight in there. So it's good and sealed. But now I need to put the fork seal on. So this is the fork seal. It's interesting. It's easy to tell which side goes on. You see this little crack in the middle here. And the top part has kind of like, you see part number writing on top of here. So this is the top part. So you want to make sure you want to put it on this way going down. But first, what we want to do is I'm going to just see if I can get that to stay like here. I'm going to put a little fork oil here on the inside of the ring, so it slides down there nicely. We don't want it snagging or anything going down, because this is what kind of prevents the fork oil from coming out. So what I want to do, so I'm going to see if I can do this carefully. Put this down on the ground, and I'm going to put this top up. I'm going to push this down. I'm going to pull this away, but you want to push it all the way down, and next video I'm going to show you how to tamp it down. So you can see I set the fork seal down. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this little in here. Whoop. What this is going to do, going to kind of go down to go help us with the fork seal driver, to push that and put some pressure and over, because what we want, that fork seal, remember that bevel where that little silver spring kind of held the fork seal down into place, because it didn't really fully hold it down, but it kind of made sure it didn't pop out, right? Well, you want the fork seal to go past that little bevel. So after you bang this in, I'm going to try to get to that point, and I'll show you that little bevel that's available. All right, so just trying to see if you can see in there, see the little bevel down in there. You can see where that metal clamp is going to need to sit and stay happy to help keep the fork sealed in. Okay, you see a little bevel just above the fork seal. You see a little bevel there. That's where that little metal clamp is going to go. All right, now that we've got the fork seal in there, I'm just going to slide the little snap ring over down the tube, trying to make it snap into that little groove. Just gonna push it down in there a little bit. It should really snap in. Just kind of pop in there. And you really want to make sure that's seated in all the way around. That looks like that worked perfectly. So, you can look inside there. Seated in the little tube all the way around. Perfect. All right, now that we got the clip inside there, fork seals tamped down in there nice and snug. Our screw is bolted in here with 34 foot-pounds. And now we need to put the little washer down, back over it. I mean, it's pretty self-evident how this kind of goes down in here, right? The smaller and just kind of going towards the top. So you kind of push that down over. Then it's just going to kind of push on in there. Again, really hard to do this with just one hand, right? Well, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then obviously what you do, you just press that down in there. Then you slide back over your chrome cap. And we'll move on to the next step. Whoop. Perfect. All right, now that we've got the fork completely assembled, we need to slide the fork gently back up into the housing. Again, gonna need another hand here. Okay. Now that I've got that up there, there's a little bevel. See at the top? I want this to be just above the bevel aligned with the top of this little bracket here. And then I'm going to use my 5/16 hex socket to tighten the clamps back down. These two bolts to hold the fork into place. Alright, so I double checked the manual. There were no torque settings set for those screws. So I just tightened them to as much of I can tighten them. I mean, not just trying to stress them, but at least make sure that they're definitely firm. Now, we want to put the fork tube cap back on. I put that sheet of metal thing that was inside there. It goes down into the that little washer, and then down there's like a big spring below that, right? And next, what we're going to need to do is, if you look inside of the manual, since I have a FXDF, is we need to put in 26.5 ounces of fork oil inside of there. Okay, we're going to do that now. Now you can get a measuring cup and measure it perfectly. I mean, I'm just using the lines on the side of the fork oil. I mean, estimate it. I mean, it's got the lines in, you see the low level in the middle. I'm just going to kind of follow along with that. Okay. All right, so I'm going to pour the fork oil down in here. Now, when you pour it in, you want to pour it down slowly, just a little bit at a time, to make sure that like it has time to settle in. While the air bubbles kind of get out. Just pour it a little bit at a time. Okay. I'm going to keep doing this a little bit at a time, and then I'm going to let it sit for a little bit to let it kind of settle on in there, and make sure nothing leaks out the other end, because I'm pretty sure it won't, because I have that at the right torque setting. So go a little bit at a time. There you go. Okay, I'm gonna let that strip and drain down in there a little bit. Give it a few minutes, and then I'm gonna come back and I'll leave this just kind of sitting here. Let's see. Make sure it gets all in there. Okay. All right, now we got all the oil filled up in there. We got 26 ounces.
Now what we need to do is just put the fork tube cap back on. I still have some painter's tape on there to kind of protect it. You're gonna probably have to push down with quite a bit of pressure on there. So I'm gonna have to definitely need both hands on this. Maybe even get on top of this, but some of the other videos I've seen, this is just kind of really difficult part. You're gonna need a lot of pressure. You just gotta get the threading started, and then start getting that on there, and then you gotta set the proper torque on it again. Here, you can see for the fork tube cap, we need 22 to 59 foot-pounds. Okay, probably gonna go the higher end on that one, maybe 45, 50 if I can. So, because this is the fork tube, really don't want that thing popping out while I'm riding around. Okay, but this is why it's important to have torque settings. All right, YouTubers, I'd have to tell you that that fork cap did not disappoint. It was definitely very difficult to put on. You can see I finally got it on there, but I had to literally pull out a ladder and leverage myself on top of the bike to apply pressure down on top of the fork cap while I was trying to turn it with the torque wrench, and it was definitely a little beast. So hopefully you guys have a little less trouble. I did also look up the torque settings for the pinch bolts here. That's actually 35 foot-pounds. Just want to make sure, I was kind of a stickler. I want to make sure I got the right torque setting. Now, also, I started to go ahead and put the wheel on. Just kind of want to make sure you notice the orientation. Like for my wheel, you can see there's a little spacer there. It goes in between the fork and the wheel, and that's the other end. And the other thing, I didn't take note of this before, on mine, there's this little piece, I'm not even sure what this thing's called, it goes right there. And then you'll have the washer on the other side of the fork here, and then the nut, right? And this cable here, and I think there's a little clamp here to kind of clamp it up here somehow. I'll figure that out here in a second. And went ahead and start just attaching. I got to screw this all in, the calipers here. Put that back together, and I did look up the torque setting for this, for the wheel bolt for the axle nut. It is, looks like 70 to 75 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna go ahead and look at my torque wrench here, go ahead and get that all configured, and we're gonna go ahead and bolt that down. All right, cool. Tubers, okay, here we go. Final steps here. We've got the calipers we're installing here. Right here, we got those two bolts there we got to put on. And then obviously we got these copper bolts right here. Again, I looked at the manual. Here we see the caliper mounting. Looks like it's 28 to 38 foot-pounds. I'll probably do about 34. I finished bolting on the axle bolt here. And I did about 73. 74 was kind of a little extra generous on that one, just because yeah, I really don't want that thing coming off. You know, that would be a bad day, I think. So I want to thank you. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the little DIY effort that I did here, and hopefully this helps. Y'all have a good day.